welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Melanie Znona in Washington, and we begin with breaking news. The Trump administration today announcing it is ending its surge of federal agents to Minnesota, and that a, quote, significant drawdown is now underway. It comes as funding for the Department of Homeland Security is set to lapse tomorrow, with Democrats and the White House so far unable to reach an agreement on reforms to ICE. Starting in Minnesota, President Trump's border czar Tom Homan making the announcement this morning that the federal government's immigration crackdown, dubbed Operation Metro Surge, is over after weeks of backlash, violent clashes between agents and protesters, and the deaths of 2 American citizens.
I have proposed, and President Trump has concurred, that this surge operation conclude. A significant drawdown has already been underway this week and will continue to the next week. The surge is leaving Minnesota safer, Minneapolis safer, because of the cooperation we got with the counties and the state and local law enforcement responding to our needs. I'll say it again, it's less of a sanctuary state for criminals.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz reacting, welcoming the announcement, but also acknowledging it marks the start of a long road ahead to recovery.
The announcement today by Mr. Homan, we are cautiously optimistic, as we've said, and that this surge of untrained, aggressive federal agents are going to leave Minnesota. And I guess they'll go wherever they're going to go. But the fact of the matter is, they left us with deep damage, generational trauma, an issue the president saw himself as being strong, certainly politically, has eroded into a albatross around their neck. And so I think, and my take was, they knew they needed to get out of here, but in very Trumpian fashion, they needed to save face.
The drawdown in Minneapolis comes as the Department of Homeland Security is barreling towards a shutdown tomorrow night, with lawmakers deadlocked over reforms to ICE. Democrats signaling they will not support another stopgap funding bill for DHS, and arguing the White House isn't seriously engaged in negotiations. Republicans, though, are pointing the finger right back at Democrats. Here's Senate Majority Leader John Thune.
We warned Democrats they were not allowing enough time for this process, but they insisted on their 2-week time frame CR anyway. And now that we have been proven right, the onus is on Democrats to agree to an additional CR to allow time to complete the negotiations. Unless, of course, Democrats are more interested in a political issue than they are in an actual outcome.
And in the Senate today, top immigration officials testified before the Senate Homeland Security Committee, facing questions about their tactics and the circumstances surrounding the deaths of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy. Republican Committee Chairman Senator Rand Paul opening the hearing with this warning for the heads of ICE and CBP.
It's clearly evident that the public trust has been lost. To restore trust in ICE and Border Patrol, they must admit their mistakes, be honest and forthright with their rules of engagement, and pledge to reform.
Joining me now is NBC senior national political reporter Sahil Kapur, NBC White House correspondent Julie Tsirkin, and NBC senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley. Thank you so much for joining me. Sahil, I want to start with you. What has been the reaction on Capitol Hill today to that announcement about a drawdown of federal agents in Minnesota?
Hey, Mel. Well, Republicans are sticking close to President Trump here. Many of them are eager to move on from this situation in Minnesota. And among Democrats, the reaction has been twofold. They say good, but not good enough. The reason being they don't trust the administration. They say anything President Trump and his officials do can easily be undone. And that's why they insist that DHS needs structural reforms and limitations, which they say have to be codified into law, which is the main reason that DHS is on a path to be shut down tomorrow at midnight, given that they don't have an agreement yet. Our colleague Ryan Noble spoke to Senator Amy Klobuchar, the Democrat from Minnesota, who's running for governor. Take a listen to what she said.
So obviously, Mr. Holman said today that they've concluded their activities in Minnesota. Does that bring you any degree of relief?
It does some, but we know this isn't over yet. What I take from all this is that Minnesota stood up. We stood up, we stared them down, and we didn't blink. We stood up for our country and for democracy. And now there must still be a lot of work to do. And there's got to be accountability for the money spent here. I didn't vote for this $75 billion that they added to the ICE budget. I think it's outrageous. They're now bigger than the FBI. And then this agency needs a complete overhaul. But my number one focus over the next few days is to hold them to their word that ICE is out of Minnesota.
And in addition to that, Mel, Minnesota's AG Keith Ellison was on Capitol Hill today testifying. He said the demotion of Greg Bovino has been a positive development, that he's actually had some positive, constructive conversations with Tom Homan, who's taking over the situation, which he said wasn't the case with Bovino or DHS Secretary Kristi Noem.
Yeah, really fascinating hearing on Capitol Hill today. That DHS funding bill, though, it did fail in the Senate today. So, Sahil, explain to me what happens now and how long could DHS actually be shut down here?
Yeah, it's practically certain, Mel, that there will be a DHS shutdown tomorrow at midnight. Note that more than 90% of the government is fully funded, so the shutdown only applies to DHS. That includes the TSA, that includes FEMA, it includes the Coast Guard. It doesn't, for instance, include air traffic controllers. So it's a bit of a different situation than we had last fall. What's interesting here is that the two sides are actually talking and they're engaging. I was just at a press conference moments ago with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. And what was interesting is what he didn't say. He didn't say what the White House is offering in return in exchange for what the Democrats are offering. He didn't say who he's negotiating with at the White House. The fact that these details aren't spilling out tends to be a sign that negotiations are actually constructive. He did say that the White House and Republicans need to get serious, which he insisted they're not. So there's still some ways to go here. And there's also the fact that both chambers just left town. There are no lawmakers around anymore. So they're not supposed to be back until about a week and a half. If they do come to a deal, then the House and the Senate are going to have to come back from recess to vote on it. But so far, we don't even have that yet. So this could go on for a while now.
An empty Capitol and a looming shutdown, something we are all too familiar with around here. Sahil, thank you so much. Julie, I want to turn to you. What do we know, if anything, about that counterproposal that was offered by the White House to Democrats last night?
Mel, I'll pick up where Sahil left off, which is that it is a good sign that when I asked a senior administration official what exactly they put in their counterproposal that was sent yesterday, what exactly are the sticking points, they really refused to engage on it. That tells me that they're still willing to negotiate, even as they say, and blame Democrats for this impending shutdown, saying that the blame is on them for the shutdown of those critical services that you heard Sahil talk about. But when I pressed the senior administration official just a couple of moments ago, what are some of the red lines that we're talking about here? They mentioned the warrantless arrest. That has been a sticking point, a demand that Democrats have asked for. Also, the demand that these ICE agents remove their masks. That's something that President Trump had referred to earlier today. But interestingly, what they said is the administration is not going to accept concessions that meaningfully affect its ability to carry out its immigration enforcement agenda. We know the timeline on this, that the two sides, the White House and Democrats, have been trading papers since about last Saturday. So far, though, of course, we don't know exactly what the sticking points are. But I thought what was notable, as the senior administration official also said, is that if this isn't progress, what is? The fact that that drawdown was announced today, the fact that they gave Democrats a substantive and binding proposal dealing with practices of the Department of Homeland Security's immigration enforcement. Those are the words of the senior administration official. Clearly, they want to come to some kind of deal with Democrats. And I should note that they began that background call by saying what happened in Minneapolis was a tragic situation. So clearly a very different situation than we found ourselves in the fall when Sahil was referring to the shutdown then.
Julie Tsirkin from a still snowy White House lawn. Thank you so much. Julia, I want to bring you into this conversation. Is it clear what's next in terms of this drawdown?
Well, it's not, and I think that's news in itself, in a way. If you're picking up on what Julie's saying, she's saying that this drawdown is in part supposed to be a signal to Democrats that, as President Trump told our Tom Yamas last week, they are considering a softer touch on immigration. Previously, when one city drew down, we knew about the next city. It went directly from L.A. to Chicago to Charlotte to New Orleans to Minneapolis, really with just a matter of maybe a half a week in between any of those cities as they moved people around. Now, Border Patrol seems to be out of the scene. Greg Bovino's back down at the border. He led some of the most aggressive tactics. And people I've been speaking to who were on the ground in Minneapolis Minneapolis know that they're leaving and they don't have plans to go anywhere next except back to their home offices. So you're talking about going from 3,000 federal agents that have been ramped up since November 29th in Minneapolis to back to their normal footprint of 150. So even if those 150 continue to be aggressive and make a lot of arrests, by and large, the people of Minneapolis are going to notice a big change in what they see in their day-to-day communities.
One thing that stuck out to me in that press conference today is that Tom Homan said that Minnesota is now safer. Put that into context for us. What does that mean, and what did the White House really accomplish here with this operation?
Well, it's a talking point we've heard a lot from the White House, and President Trump will show these stats saying that crime is down dramatically in certain cities, and he attributes that to ICE arrests. But a lot of times there's sort of unfact-checkable claims. What we do know is that 4,000 people were arrested for immigration violations in Minneapolis during this crackdown that began November 29th. That's pretty much on par with what we saw in a lot of the other immigration crackdowns. But what was different about Minneapolis is, A, the pushback from protesters that we saw, 2 fatal shootings, and the sweeping arrests that they made when they accidentally arrested U.S. citizens. They started asking people for their papers while they were pumping gas. It really brought about a more dystopian feel, and you got a lot of pushback from that. And so I think when they look at where they might go next, or if they do go somewhere next, they're now trying to contend with even people who are, NRA supporters, saying that this went too far and was an executive overreach.
On the subject of DHS, they are set to run out of money at midnight tomorrow. Are there any plans in place for what they're going to do, how they're going to potentially keep moving money around to keep some of these programs afloat?
Well, ironically, ICE, which is really the heart of what Democrats are complaining about, and CBP won't be affected because of that money that came from the One Big Beautiful Bill. That agency went from $9 billion to $75 billion in a year. So they're not going to be hurt. What we heard today in a Senate hearing from some of the leaders at DHS is that they expect agencies like CISA and TSA to be hurt. I do think there is some reprogramming they can do. I mean, they pulled from both of those agencies to send that money to ICE. So theoretically, they could pull it back. But oftentimes what we see in a shutdown, Julie and Sahil know this even better, is that the administration wants to show there's some pain to try to move Democrats further along.
Julie.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.